So we will get started. So hello everyone. I am Nina Robertson, Director of Systems Change here at the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. Thank you all for being here with us today. Dr. Hardiman's keynote was phenomenal, and I hope you all feel informed and just as inspired as I am right now. The musical performance by Joy was just dynamic. The music of Joy is just so great. I'm so glad that she could be here with us today and share space. In this session today, we'll have a facilitated discussion on building leadership through cross-sector solutions. We have a panel of deeply dynamic women leaders from across sectors, providing the opportunity for us to listen, learn, and share perspectives on what it means and looks like to build leadership and community power for women and girls in our state. Our panelists for the session include our panel moderator, the wonderful Dr. Verna, who is the founder and CEO of the Power of People Consulting. Our panelists, we have Chanda Smith-Baker, Chief Impact Officer and Senior Vice President of Impact at the Minneapolis Foundation. Chanda is also the Women's Foundation of Minnesota's Board Vice Chair. We have Mayor Maria Regan Gonzalez, Systems Director of Equity Initiatives at mHealth Fairview, and also the Mayor of Richfield. We have Dr. Nerita Hughes, Dean of School of Business, Careers, Education, and Workforce Innovation at North Memorial Community College, and President and Chief Executive Officer of JG Consulting. And we also have Deba Sin, President of Construction and the Home Improvement Division at 3M, and also is the Women's Foundation of Minnesota's Board Treasurer. I am so thrilled to have these women here with us today to hear their wisdom, share their journeys, and inspire us to activate in our lanes, to create and build leadership opportunities for women and girls. As I reflect on my own leadership journey, I think about the influential women and people in my life, the mentors, bosses, teachers, colleagues, the young people who inspired me and pushed me when needed. I think about the programs I participated in, my academic opportunities, and those who created the space for me to participate. I had people, programs, and opportunities to lead in my community, to dream and to build. And I'm so grateful for it, so much so that I designed my career around my journey. My work is centered around building leadership and power and opportunity for women and girls in their communities to win, not only to survive, but to thrive. A program that I work closely with here at the Women's Foundation is the Young Women's Initiative of Minnesota, a public-private partnership between the Women's Foundation and the Governor's Office of the state of Minnesota. The Young Women's Initiative is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar, first-of-its-kind statewide initiative. Built out of the work the Women's Foundation has led with girls in our state since 2002, including Girls Best and Minnesota Girls Are Not for Sale, we continue to listen and center communities of young women most impacted by injustice. Because when we do, we see that they have vision and solutions. And we know that by centering their leadership and knocking down barriers to their economic opportunity and increasing their safety, it increases equity and justice and cultivates the conditions for them to lead and to thrive. One of the complementary components of the Young Women's Initiative is our Executive Council, a collective impact model comprised of up to 50 cross-sector leaders in government, business, nonprofit, education, philanthropy, and Minnesota communities, all committed to driving collective impact for social change. The Executive Council is tasked to deepen understanding of gender and racial inequities and solutions in Minnesota, catalyze resources, and act within organizations to move systems change strategies forward. Executive Council members are committed to leading by example, holding themselves and institutions accountable, disrupting the status quo, dismantling barriers, and advocating for gender and racial equity. Members are sharing wisdom and expertise, creating inclusive, equitable workplace policies and culture that allow the growing workforce of young women of color to thrive, shifting organizational practices and policies for large-scale systems change, and building meaningful relationships with cohorts of young women using their networks to become mentors and supporters who invest in the success of young women. Since launching the council, cross-sector leaders have launched STEM and other pathway programs for young women and girls, created a full scholarship program for Indigenous and Native American university students, used and shared the Women's Foundation of Minnesota's intersectional equity framework concepts with their networks, influenced policy and policymakers, created space for young women and girls to sit on a municipal youth council, and members have forged new partnerships with other leaders from different and same sectors to share and combine their efforts. Together with young women in the lead, the Executive Council is building leaders and community power and supporting pathways to future prosperity for young women and girls in our communities. In today's session, we're going to hear from our panel to spotlight additional ways leaders, similar to those on the Executive Council, can work within our spheres of influence to build power, share power, and organize by centering women and girls for change. Again, I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today. I want to thank our panel participants for leading this conversation that we're about to have, this discussion that we're about to have. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Verna Price, who is actually a co-chair of the Young Women's Initiative Executive Council. Dr. Verna will be moderating our discussion. Dr. Verna, thank you for your leadership, and I'll let you take it away now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nina. I certainly appreciate that. You are in for a treat. And we're really discussing this really big question of how do we build opportunities for leadership development for our women and girls in Minnesota across sectors. So regardless of where you choose to do your work and to fulfill your purpose in life, that you know that there's a place of leadership for you there. And the question is, how do you get there? How does it work? And one of the best ways to really understand that is to hear from women who have already been there, right? In my work, I've been doing this work as an educator for over 30 years. And I would say as an educator, the number one thing that I've learned from working with girls in particular is that it's really difficult to be it until you see it. It's really difficult. And so this morning, we get to see it. We get to see leadership on these women. We get to hear their stories. And then we get to get their really kind of their own expert voice on what's next. What's this really big picture of how do we move forward? What are some of the really big issues facing us? And how do we deal with big things like the big old resignation? And how do we all fit into that, right? And so we get to hear the stories of distinct voices from our women leaders, and we're going to get right into it. I think, as I think about my career, one of the things that would have taken me so much farther, so much faster, would have been mentors like these women who have already been there. They know what's going on, and they don't mind telling their stories. And so I'm going to call our session a for real and a for raw session. In other words, they're going to be for real and they're going to be raw with telling their stories to you so that you can take this information and take it back to the girls and the women that you work with every day. So let's go ahead and welcome our panelists. And Ms. Nina already talked a little bit about their position, so I'm just going to go right into the work. Ms. Chanda, who I've known from our community, African-American community, Northside community, for many, 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 many years. You know, some people you know so long they might as well be family, but you're not actually family if you feel like you're family. You've had quite a journey, Ms. Chanda. So reflect a little bit on your journey, and where does mentorship fit into all that? And what are you seeing in terms of girls and women being represented in that philanthropic space, particularly at your level? Welcome.
Thank you. And yes, we go way, 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 way back. My ways keep getting added as I age, but I appreciate the setup for the conversation. How have mentors impacted my life? I think that it depends on how you look at the word mentor. Like when I look backwards, I grew up in a community of people that were accountable to me and for me. And so they provided guidance along the way. And so I don't know if I would have called them mentors necessarily, but they were certainly guiders to me and for me, whether or not it was, you need to stand up straight when you go in the room, or I could tell you had something to say. What was it? And baby, next time say it out loud. Or you're going to get up in this church and you're going to recite this responsive reading and, or whatever.
Ooh, recitation.
Right? Stuff that I didn't necessarily want to do. But you recognize in how many ways that community around you push you. They recognize and they push you and they present opportunities. And I think that when you act into them, you see more possibilities than you would if you didn't. And I would say that's been consistent. It has been wonderful women around me that have seen it as their business to provide that guidance. And, Karen Kelly Arula is certainly someone who I also became familiar with. She attended my church. I remember looking at Karen, the back of her head saying, I wonder what job she has. Wouldn't it be great for me to do something like that one day? And so here I am in philanthropy. And so representation matters, because I could go to church and see Karen sitting there and aspire into a role that I didn't even know what it was, because of the way that she carried herself. And what I did know is that she was giving back to community. And what I did know is that she was a woman, and I did know she was Black. And I did see it as being possible for me to achieve what she had achieved. And it is quite a blessing to sit in a role in an organization where she had the opportunity to lead.
Wow. We have a first ever here on our screen, and I believe that is Mayor Gonzalez. Mayor Gonzalez, you are a first. You are a first Latina mayor in Minnesota. And I give you, let's just give her up some snaps. Just snap her up here for a minute. I love that. So tell me a little bit, share with us what inspired you to run, and tell us a little bit about that journey for you in being the first.
Well, I definitely never considered a career in politics or running for office. And I think a lot of women and women of color, unfortunately, we might not see ourselves in that role. And I started working for the city of Richfield, and I started to see this massive disconnect between the programs and services that the city government provided and an interest on behalf of staff to say, we want to reach our families, and we're not reaching our families. We're having to, close down programs because we're not getting attendance. But then I also knew the community very well and my neighbors, and I would hear moms saying, we want to enroll our kids in soccer, but we don't know how to do it. And we want to be a part of the community, and we don't understand how to access. And why can't we just take our family to the soccer field and play on a weekend? And we can't. We're being told we can't, that it's reserved. And so I started to see that disconnect. And simultaneously, kind of the last thing that really pushed me was the killing of Philando Castile. And before that, I was working with community members in my community, the Latino community, to get healthcare coverage for undocumented Minnesotans before the Affordable Care Act passed. And we were unable to make that happen. And essentially, I just came to this realization, which we all know, that there is a war on people of color and communities of color in our nation, whether it's subliminal or blatant. And I just got to a point where I said, I need to do something more. And I started to see this gap at the local level. And I said, I think I can do something about it. And I started to really enjoy this bridge building in my job. And I said, of course. And it just hit me like a light bulb. I'm like, of course I love this. I'm biracial, bicultural, Midwestern Chicana. I grew up playing ice hockey. I grew up having a quince años, party. And that is representative of my city of Richfield. It's a multiracial, very diverse city, almost 50% people of color, 72% students of color. And I kind of found my calling, and I said, I don't know anything about being a candidate, and I'm not really interested in that piece of it, but I said, I have something to contribute. And it's not just about a seat for me, it's about opening that seat for our whole community. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't need to know how to be a candidate. There's people that know people that can help me. And what I do know is how to be a leader and to be genuine and authentic and bring people with different backgrounds together to build something together, because that's what I've done my whole life as a multiracial person. And I said, that's something I can contribute to my city. And that's why I decided to run. And it actually was because I was like, I can't wait to support a candidate. I'm going to vote for them. I'm going to go in their campaign. I'm going to volunteer. Somebody that has those goals that I share and that vision that I share for this beautiful community. And I kept being like, where are the candidates? And there was only one, and that was not their agenda. And there was nobody to fill that seat. And I was like, I guess I'm going to run for office. And if we don't win, we're going to learn and build power and grow our civic engagement and leadership and voice. And if I win, I probably won't even win. I don't even want to think about it. But that's why I decided to run. And I'm so thankful. And the message that I just want to say, when you're a first, there is no playbook. And to be honest, we don't need a playbook. And there's not a playbook that includes us. And there's not a playbook that includes us and welcomes us. So as a first, we create our own playbooks. And the answer to any type of leadership, I will say, is to own who you are, know who you are, and own that genuinely and authentically. And that will open the doors to how to lead, what the answer is, and how to show up in the world. If you're going to continue to try to fill the playbooks that are out there for us, they are exclusive of us. They tell us we're not good enough. They tell us that we need to look and act differently. And the answer is not that. The answer is there's not playbooks for us, and we need to create our own playbooks. And in many ways, we can take, pages from the mentors who have come before us, who paved the way for us, from our family members, from our mothers, from our grandmas. They did so much to lead, and we can take pages from that playbook, but we got to elevate it to the next level in leadership and create our own genuine, authentic leadership. And there's no playbook for that. Just own who you are.
Love that. Love that. Well, if you're taking notes, I am taking notes. Mayor Gonzalez and Ms. Chanda, I'm taking my notes. For Ms. Chanda, it's just like, that's me. That could be me. Like that person in front of me could be me, right? And for Mayor Gonzalez is create your own playbook, right? Look in the mirror. You're it. You are the playbook. Love that, love that, love that. Well, Dr. Hughes, I spent many years in higher ed. I'm still actually in higher ed. And I know we got some issues in higher ed, Dr. Hughes, because, I'm one of us, right? I'm one of us. So as you think about, so thank you for staying there, for being there. It's so important. In my Girls Taking Action program, I just say to the girls, I just need to get you out of high school and get you to college. I just need you to get you to college. I know if I can get you into the hands, of higher ed somehow, some way, things are going to shift for you. And I'm so thankful for that. So reflecting on your journey, what do you see as some of the challenges for women of color in higher ed right now? And what can we do to better prepare women for leadership roles in higher ed?
Yes, we still have multiple issues still in higher ed. Specifically as a woman of color, one of the things that, consistently is still, evident in higher ed is there's still certain positions that are highly held by men or individuals that identify, as male from a sexuality perspective. So it's how do you make sure that your voice is being heard and it's not being silenced? How do you not become, as a Black woman, how do I not fall into the angry Black woman syndrome when you are trying to absolutely, carry out your point, when there's tons of politics that exist within higher education, from really trying to get a policy, move forward to looking at student-related issues. Those are some of the things that, as a woman and as a woman of color, that you have to be cognizant of. Am I using my the right words? As I'm trying to make a point, am I, making sure that it doesn't come across too aggressive, so if we're too aggressive, then we know what we're kind of labeled as, so to speak. And if you're not as aggressive, then you're too soft. And should you really be in this position, and don't necessarily try to follow a path, if that makes sense. That's kind of my mantra is, I don't necessarily follow a path, I make my own path. We don't necessarily have to go the traditional route. And those are some of the challenges that we, enter in. So you look at myself as an administrator, the typical route is for you to be a full-time faculty member, then, either a department chair or coordinator, then you move into an administrative role. That was not my journey. So we typically have a non-traditional pathway, and then we're questioned. How did she get there? How did, why her? I'm sure there were others, so to speak. And so being able to really have that guidance, I think back to something that Chanda said, you got to speak up. The Easter speech back in church. I grew up in a family where both my parents are from down south, and my father, say what you mean what you say. Once it comes out, you can't take it back. And so, as a Black woman, people are not very welcoming of my direct approach, but they can absolutely guarantee they know where I'm coming from.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. And in higher ed, and of course, we have to move to the sciences and to STEM, which is really important. And Deba, you are doing some awesome work over there. Just a special shout out. 3M took on our girls this year and sent their women leaders into our groups with our girls and brought their science with them, and have really opened up the hearts of our girls who thought they would never like math or science, to really think about math and science as a potential career in ways, at least they know they belong there. So thank you so much. So in your work, in your journey, being a woman of color in STEM, Deba, why don't you talk about that in terms of representation, and what do you do about the underrepresentation of women of color in STEM, and your leadership journey in this corporate sector?
Thank you, Dr. Verna. There's a lot to talk about, and I know we won't have time for all of that. But it's, just for a little bit of context setting, I'm the second daughter of a very middle-class family growing up as I was in India. Just growing up with everyone in the family, neighborhood, and others looking at my parents with pity that they're 2 daughters and no sons. That's the first thing that I was facing as the second daughter. And then on top of that, it was girls can't be good at math, girls can't be good at science. That was a constant feed in from everybody around in society. What is very disappointing for me is we still have to work so hard to shift that social dialogue on girls, and especially people of color, in science. So I'll speak a little bit about it. I can tell you, as I came in my mid-30s to the US, joined corporate America, biases were rife, right? I was a brown woman, the first MBA, engineer MBA on the floor. I was also at that point in time becoming a single mother, and the boatload of biases that come the minute, and I'm sure there are many on this call who are single moms or have been single moms. But as we looked at those, there was no choice, no option but to fight those biases head on. And there was a small cohort of women who are today in very senior positions, not just in 3M, but broadly across the science and technology community, broadly across the industrial community that I worked in, because talk about parts of the world being closed for women and people of color. I think this may be known, but less than 1% of Fortune 500 CEOs are African Americans. We have 93% of Fortune 500 CEOs who are white, male, more often than not. Big chunk of that is male, not all. And it's, I remind myself the number 1, 2, 3, 1% African Americans, 2% Asians, 3% Latinx. That's how small that cohort is. So I remind myself every day, if I don't find my cause worth fighting for, why should somebody else? Corporate America has a lot of work ahead of it, so we have to do that. On the topic of STEM, Dr. Verna, you talked about how 3M really grabbed onto this cause. We realized our innovation, not just ours, but the field of science and technology, is under attack from a lot of societal misunderstanding. So as a science-based company, we've been consistently investing, State of Science Index, and I can share some of these links. But the one that I want to talk about is the campaign that we launched now 3 years ago, which specifically spoke about representation in science. So it was called the Not the Science Type. And there's some fun videos. I can put in some links out there that you should see, because for women and girls in particular, context is far more important than content. And when they don't see the representation and they don't get the context of the broader STEM, the purpose of STEM, they will fall out. Self-selection is the biggest issue for STEM, for girls and especially for women of color. So representation is critical. We brought in this campaign around Not the Science Type, where you can see girls who, love their hairstyle, or, who are playing soccer, or many of us have very, very similar stories about what brought us into science. Absolutely critical, this work. So we cannot step away from it. And I remind myself every night when I go to sleep, if my cause is not worth fighting for, if I don't find it worth fighting for, why should somebody else?
Oh, wow, Deba, thank you. And forgive me for messing up your name. Miss Chanda, she sent me a note in the chat going, girlie, her name is Deba. Thank you. I appreciate that call out. That's how we grow, right? That's called mentorship in action right there. Love that. So this summit, the theme here is building power for a new day. Lovely, amazing, right? There's a lot of implications. There's a lot loaded in that statement. So as a group, I just want to pose this question to you of what do you see as some of the urging, pressing issues in our state and more broadly today as it relates to girls and women and getting girls and women up to these leadership levels in all of your sectors to create the level of change that you're talking about. So we no longer, Deba, have to have a 1, 2, 3, right? We could be double digit. That would be awesome. So what do you see as some of the, just pressing issues? And I'll start with Ms. Chanda, just lay it out for us.
Man, so racism, gender biases, I think undergird all of the inequities and disparities that we have. I believe fully in even what Deba was saying, like if you don't see the possibility, if you can't see the route. So I think all of us understand that we have had as many people in our lives that have supported us as we've had people that have undermined us or excluded us. And sometimes it's weighed equally and sometimes it's tipped. And we got to see what kind of grit we have to muddle through all of the passive aggressive, the undermining, the minimization that we have to navigate. And so, I'm a believer that tackling the isms will help all the systems work better. I'm not a person that necessarily believes that programmatic investments alone will do the trick. There has to be individual commitment of understanding how their biases are showing up in all of the spaces that you're in and how it is doing harm every day and diminishing the light and the dreams of people that don't see themselves as included, and that it is a personal responsibility, if you believe in progress, to make sure you understand how your light is either shining or diminishing someone else's. I believe wholeheartedly in the women and that know that they have a voice, but are afraid to speak it. I believe wholeheartedly that we have a role to continue to individually push ourselves into saying what we know is right in our hearts and our heads and our minds and on behalf of our community. But we are sometimes afraid of, as Nerita said, becoming the angry Black woman or whatever that comparable narrative is, that we also do hold the power to move through that. And so it's not someone else's job necessarily to open the door. It is helpful that they are going to be more supportive once you're in the door, but we know that's not always the case. And so, but we hold more power than we understand. And then I think we have to continue to shine light on the issues like the Minneapolis Foundation, like the Women's Foundation, like all of us have in our respective roles, that you have to continue to elevate what needs to change as much as you elevate the inspirational stories of change, right? You need to operate in balance to allow people to continue to move with hope and with grace and with boldness.
And Ms. Chanda, isn't that like the balance, the elevating of what needs to change with stories of individual change that needs to be collectively brought together, right? And in every sector, not just one spot or one organization. Mayor Gonzalez, what are some of your thoughts? Or just jump in, please, just jump in.
Yeah, mine are pretty similar. So I'm a public health professional, and that's actually why I ran for office, because 80% of what actually creates individual health, community health, are social determinants, our housing, whether we have a community where we feel welcomed, our education, the color of our skin, and who determines a lot of that? Local government, our school boards, and we are making that change in our own backyards. So I would say in Minnesota, we have some of the worst racial inequities. You name the outcome, we have some of the worst racial inequities in those outcomes, and it's absolutely not acceptable. And there's a leadership and a governance gap, and our communities are seen as deficit-based. And we need leaders that can hold complexity and that can say, we need to step up and be the people we're looking for to save us. We got to be those people. And how do we create a future that is abundance-based, that is asset-based, that is rooted in our cultures and our communities? And that's going to be the approach that we need to take to govern, to have communities that are welcoming and inclusive, that build wealth, that build prosperity. And all those isms are the issues that we need to tackle, and it needs a different type of approach. And also, I would say a lot of times people are looking to women of color to fill this gap. We are filling this gap. And how do we do so in a way where we love and respect ourselves? And we are not going to be all things to all people, getting underpaid and killing ourselves to do this work. How do we value ourselves? How do we create the space? So how do you do that in a way that gives you energy and life as well, and doesn't come at that cost? Because unfortunately, that's what people expect us to do and how to lead. And we can't lead like that. And we can't build abundance and prosperity in that way. So those are some of the things that I think about a lot.
Wow. Amazing. Deba, Dr. Hughes, what do you think? What do you see as some of those pressing issues?
Yeah, maybe I can.
Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead,
Deba.
Okay. Maybe I can make a couple comments. As you saw our numbers, the outcomes are drastic when it comes to corporate America. So obviously we're not, taking it lying down. What I'm very energized by is now the top 100 executives in our company in 3M have the DEI scorecard. They have to show progress. We're all accountable, not just paying lip service. We're accountable for the progress and the metrics around that progress. Before progress comes participation. And typically the state of Minnesota has had, and if I may say so, easy excuse in the past that we don't have applicants is how it normally is bubbled up, right? Even though our community data clearly shows in terms of availability of diverse talent who are qualified with engineering degrees, with a science and STEM degree, with an MBA. And Dr. Hughes, I'm really keen to connect with you later to learn about how you're driving it. Talent is not the issue. Biases are the issue. The gates we are putting in front are the issue. So now we have very targeted agenda on how are we spreading our recruitment web? How are we recruiting from diverse colleges, the HBUs, but also in our own community? How are we being intentional about bringing in that talent? And then you see very quickly that bringing in alone is not enough. If they do not feel welcome, if they do not feel included, if there is micro biases that they're facing every day in every meeting, it is clearly not working. So we address the outcomes first, we bring in accountability, we bring in the participation, we bring in the pipeline of talent that we need, and then hold ourselves accountable every step of the way to driving that progress. One element that I would highlight out here that I think after the very, very unfortunate murder of George Floyd, that we have as diverse leaders kind of locked arms on and realized is that we were not telling our stories. We were not talking about what we had faced and sometimes, unfortunately, still facing, right? Even in leadership roles, you're not immune from bias. Mm-hmm. We realized how important storytelling was. So candidly, none of us have more than 24 hours in the day, but how intentional are we in giving the time that's needed for storytelling, giving the time that's needed for listening intently to our employee populations, what they're facing, why is progress still so hard? Those would be my thoughts. And then finally, I would say I'm such a big believer in what Dr. Madeleine Albright said, that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. So how are we holding that ladder that we had climbed on? Why is it still so difficult? Are we holding it in place, or we just don't care and move on and move with our own progress?
Well, the old people in the Black church would say, well, well.
Right. Look, and let the church
Dr.
say.
Hughes, what do you think?
Amen.
What do you think? Some thoughts from you.
Well, and in addition to what, you know, these wonderful sisters have already said, the couple of things that I had also written down is that workforce gap that, you know, Deba has definitely, you know, spoken of.
Yes.
Education, of course, and let me just kind of really quickly, from the educational lens, is we need to talk holistic education.
Good.
So many times I think about when we get them from high school, we want to instantly talk about the 4-year, but we miss the trades. We miss where I'm at in North Hennepin Community College, you know, the community colleges, the technical institutions, and the value add behind that. You know, so being able to talk educationally from a holistic lens is absolutely missing. But in addition to that, I'm going to take it back even further. We are missing what we call the village. We are missing the village. I can think back when I grew up, and Chanda probably can remember this too, and the other ladies probably, you know, in their world as well, is my neighbor could get in my behind.
Hey.
If I was out of order, you know, we had people that did not have to worry about, if I touch this child, am I going to have to worry about, you know, something, you know, negative happening to me today? Or am I going to be disrespected because I've said something to somebody else's child? So I'm going to take it back to say that is also missing, is the village, that each one teach one, that as we are, you know, climbing, are we lifting as we climb? Or like David said, we're just kind of sitting on the ladder and hanging on, you know, so where is that happening today? How do we create and build up current leaders? Because at the end of the day, I want somebody to come after me. I don't want to hold the torch. I don't have to be everything to everybody. And sometimes as women, we get into that, you know, mind frame of we have to be super women. But why? How do we collaborate? How do we build up each other and let the other young women and girls see that? But we have so much negativity, or we're quick to, you know, bash someone and their leadership style because it doesn't align with your core values. But just saying, how do we collaborate? And you know what? Yes, you're doing something on this side, I'm doing something on that side, let's do it together. That's a good village, and that's community. So those are some of the pieces that are also missing. And then lastly, I want to just echo something that David said as well, as far as the talent pipeline. I hear, you know, companies say, we have a talent shortage. No, where are you looking? You don't have a talent shortage. And I always tell companies when they talk to me to say, we really want to recruit. And I'm like, before you recruit a person of color, talk to those that are of color in your own organization and find out where they're staying. You got to start there first before you can do outreach afterwards.
Yeah, can I just add to Dr. Verna? I know you're trying to, because I think companies say that, but what they're not asking themselves is this a company that is inclusive for women and people of color? They could not be coming because you have a reputation for not being inclusive. And we don't do that. The other thing is that, you know, David, when you were talking about storytelling, and I don't disagree with that at all, but we actually have we have a problem with listening in our state. Communities have been sharing their story and their pain. They have been walking away from corporation schools, all kinds of things. We have been in the streets. We have communicated about police violence. I think that I hope that our state is learning from these lessons and recognizing that avoidance and not hearing the stories of those that are being pained by our systems and people is not a good strategy. That ain't a good strategy. I see in the chat something about a good strategy. What ain't a good strategy is not listening, right? To people when they're telling a collective story of pain and abuse in the systems that we are navigating.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and Chanda, that brings really us to this other really big thing that's happening in all of our sectors, is the Great Resignation. So we're seeing people resign across, and how is that Great Resignation impacting women in your sectors and impacting our really work to move women to higher levels of leadership. So what are some of your thoughts about that? And then also, we're going to finish up this segment here pretty soon. I want you to be thinking about one thing, one action step that you would like to leave with this audience that they can do wherever they are to move the work of getting women and girls into higher levels of leadership positions. One thing, action step you can leave with them. So let's just talk briefly about this great resignation, and where do you think that sits for women and building women leaders here?
Yeah, I think that there's a danger in calling it the Great Resignation.
Oh, okay, great.
I understand, because it's been coined that way, and we do see it. But I think what happens is that it removes responsibilities from the places that they're resigning and moves it to being an individual decision. I think that if you are not, this time period has allowed us to reflect on what's important. And if you feel important in a space and you feel respected, and if you feel fairly compensated, you're less likely to resign. And so I would not, I think for women that are moving on, whether or not it's because you can't take now one more microaggression, or because a new opportunity aligns better with your vision, I would agree with Deba, like, make sure you tell a very polished story as you exit, right?
Yeah.
Like, be honest about the experience in a way that allows for people that come behind you to do better, that honors what you brought to the space. But I do think that, we are now sort of collectively at a fed up place. And so it's easy to leave places that aren't honoring. And that's the piece that I will say. I think women, particularly those that are managing multiple responsibilities, are very challenged in this point. And companies and organizations and other women, people need to understand that balance is very real. It's hard, and we need places and systems that can match the realities that we're living in.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in, and then we'll finish up with our one action step? Go ahead, Deba.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I agree with Chanda. We haven't seen this big wave of resignations. What we have seen is retirements. The baby boomers, about 6 million left the workforce last year, and now with including the 3 months of this year. What we have seen is the ability to bring in more diverse talent through our flexibility and through the hybrid workplace processes that now we are able to bring in. Doesn't apply to our plant employee population, but very much applies to our sales, office-based workers, and that's been really good for women. Now, of course, it took us 3-4 bumbling months when we were trying to figure out how do we do this, but thereafter, I think we saw tremendous gains from that, especially with diverse talent. We've given them the flexibility of joining in from wherever they are, versus you have to be in St. Paul, you have to be near the center, et cetera, et cetera. We have women who have families, especially with aging parents in rural Minnesota. They can be 3 days in the week, they're somewhere else. They're joining in on calls. We don't even ask where you're dialing in from. So that flexibility, the hybrid workplace, has actually been a benefit coming out of this. And we are seeing that we're able to keep women, especially those with young children, or women, especially those with older parents that they're having to look after. They are now more connected to the workplace. We have to figure out how do we build engagement mechanisms in the new world better. To keep that tight thread tied together. But I would say we have actually seen some very meaningful benefits for women, for diverse people, for people of color, that has helped us bring in more talent and keep them more easily engaged with the company.
Excellent. Wow. Well, I don't know who this is, but someone in the chat, Shanita, said, it's not the Great Resignation, it's the Great Recalibration. I like that language better. Yeah, that kind of like makes me want to go, yeah, let's just do that thing. Dr. Hughes, I see maybe you have a comment, but then as you comment, if you could, let's just go slide right into your action step, and then maybe we'll open it up for a question or two from the audience. The truth is that we could be doing this for a whole day. You all are just really incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes.
Yeah, so let me just really quick comment on that last question. And, I say this often, people leave people.
Mhm.
People don't leave organizations. And so what we're seeing and what we will continue to see is with the great, resignation or great recalibration, I like that as well. What has happened over the pandemic is folks really understood what's important to them. And so it was that caring piece of being able to be there for my family, being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to put up with another microaggression. I'm not going to just settle, have that mediocrity, and I'm going to move on. So that's really what I wanted to kind of add to the conversation of why we're seeing such mass exodus, if you will, is people leave people. And I think that the last 2 years caused us to kind of feel that way. So an action step that I'll end with is reach out to a young woman or even a young man and become not their mentor, become their sponsor. That is very different from a mentor. A sponsor is really going to invest. And I'll say it again, a sponsor invests in individuals. Share your story, share, the positives, the negatives, the in-between, so that they see you. And I do this even on campus as an administrator. And I said, yes, you see the glamour, you see, the fancy car, you see all this, but let me share how I got here. Let me share who helped me along the way. So if you can do one thing, that would be my action step for you. Become a sponsor to a young woman or a young gentleman, and be able to share your story to show them how you've gotten to where you are today.
Absolutely. And if you think you're going to have a question, why don't you put that question in the chat? And I am keeping an eye on the chat, so I will be able to see that. Go ahead, Mayor Gonzalez.
I just wanted to add the action step. So the great recalibration is our opportunity to own our leadership and our vision for the future. And I will tell you, I have supported so many young girls of color right now, and it worked for me to go have a beautiful, quiet space somewhere where it's a refuge, whether it's your bedroom or your backyard, or go somewhere out and dream about what is that leadership description for your next step, for your career, for your future, and write it down and make it happen. I literally made it happen for myself. I've helped multiple young girls do it, and it's come true. They write down, this is how much I want to be making. This is the scope of work. This is the level of leadership. Here's the kind of life I want to live. Sit down, write it down, and pitch it to the world and share it with your mentors. Now is the time for us to say, here's how we can contribute to improving the world. And if somebody doesn't hire you to do that, someone else that sees your leadership is going to do it. So take this opportunity of the great recalibration to write your next job, your career, your next leadership position, and make it happen. I've seen so many women and girls do it. Now is the time to do it. So go write that down.
Love it, love it, love it. Action step. Chanda, Deba, action step.
I can share mine. Dr. Hughes shared the two that I wanted to talk about. Sponsoring. We are now in the room, and let's pay forward what we have been so blessed to get in the past. Representation, and pause the conversation, change the conversation. When you hear, well, so-and-so can't be taking this job, which involves travel because she has a young child. Well, have you asked her if she wants to take that job or not? And it'll surprise you that oftentimes the answer is no, they haven't asked her yet, right? So that's a big part of what I wanted to remind ourselves. And for the young women, the young people of color are listening. As I said before, if you don't think your purpose is worth fighting for, why should somebody else believe in it? So fight for it. We have fought to get where we are today. The fight is so worth it. There are others who are coming behind you. You have to do it for them, not just for yourself.
That's great. Thank you. Ms. Chanda finishes up.
Yeah, I think my action step is to invite people to lean more deeply into the community that already supports them. That I don't think that we leverage. I think we're in a time where we can lean into imposter syndrome. We can lean into, how do I solve the problem? We can lean into the weight that we're carrying, but lean into the community that inspires and feeds your spirit and your soul, and that pushes you to do better. And by doing that, I think you just lean into other communities differently. This is a time for, I think, us to be big, but also to organize ourselves around people that are committed to your success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really big ask, because people are often worried about asking or taking too much time away from someone. I think that giving just grows, right? It grows energy, it grows inspiration. And so that would be my action that I would suggest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all so much. You're amazing women and you're doing amazing work. And it is not without sacrifice, and I understand that. And just thank you for just being a light for all of us, women and girls across Minnesota and really across the world. I'm seeing if there's a question here. And if I don't see a question, I am going to turn this back over to Miss Nina. Thank you all, and you all enjoy a great day. And thank you for being in this space, and your knowledge and your wisdom has helped all of us. Miss Nina, let's give up snaps. Let's give up some snaps for our panelists. Amazing.
That's right. This was just, thank you all again for your time and being here with us. To our panelists and Dr. Verna, our fabulous moderator. Just thank you so much for such a rich conversation and just all of the wisdom that you have shared for us all to think about ways that we can create the change that we want to see in our community for women, girls, but then also our broader community. So I'm just so grateful and full from this conversation that you all just had today. So good. I'm actually going to invite Gloria Perez, our CEO and president of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, into the conversation. And Gloria is actually going to close us out with a word before we join the main room. Gloria, welcome.
I'm here, Nina. Thank you. I was just clicking on my video and guess what? It's not working. So we'll just wing it, right? But I'm so inspired. I wish you could see the gratitude that I'm expressing visually for the conversation. Thank you, Dr. Verna. Thank you, Nina, for facilitating that. What I want to just build on for this particular conversation is the fact that what the Women's Foundation is planning to do is grow not just individual leadership, but grow community leadership, right? Investing in the movement, the kinds of things that we've been talking about here today. And so we really want all of you who are represented in this group today to think about being part of this work. You know, we have trustees here, but we also want to engage others in joining us to imagine what this could look like for the foundation. And so I know that we are intending to drop in the chat the email address of my colleague, Pam Ho, who's the Director of Philanthropic Partnerships. She's going to be leading this work at the foundation. And so you can email her at tam@wfmn.org. And certainly give us your email and just let us know that you're interested if, in fact, you want to be part of helping us imagine this work. So we're going to go back to the main session and I'm going to share a couple of closing remarks there. But I loved the fact that we were talking a little bit about, you know, we're missing this village. Like that really resonated with me. And the fact that we have a squad, and as Chanda was saying, you know, if we already have folks who are supporting us, like, let's just lean into that and be bold and not afraid. People will tell us, as we all know, we've been asked to help and there are times that we can't. They will tell us when they can't, but let's be bold. I love the fact that you've said, you know, we don't need a playbook. We are the playbook. And that's just tremendous, right? That's about trusting your gut, investing and knowing your value, and doing the listening that Dr. Regan was, or excuse me, Mayor Regan Gonzalez was saying, with thinking about what your leadership journey will be. I just love that. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all the mentors that I've had. And I think, Dr. Verna, if you can't be it until you see it is exactly right. I remember being a young college student and seeing Latinas in the community of St. Paul leading in domestic violence and in the communities around economic opportunity and affordable housing. And I was like, yes, I want to be one of those rock stars. And so, so thank you. So with that, I think I'm going to ask that we transition to the main stage. Nina, anything you want to add in terms of final remarks?
No, I think you wrapped it up well. I just want to thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you, Gloria, for closing us out with that beautiful word. And let's join back into the main room. This has been so, I'm just so full. This is great. The link to return back to the main stage has been dropped in the chat. So please join us.
Awesome. Thank you.